Hey everybody, it's Billy Porter here, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you all to celebrate the work you're doing to reimagine your future, because what happens from this day forward is up to you. America is in crisis. Climate, guns, social justice, LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, civil rights, human rights, everything is on the line right now. And my generation hasn't figured out how to address these issues. But you have. You have organized and marched and dedicated yourselves to make systemic changes. And the only way to do that, as you know, is to mobilize the largest army of young voters that this country has ever seen. If the majority of young voters come out to the polls and bring their friends with them, this country will never be the same. Thank you for being woke. Thank you for being present. Thank you for speaking truth to power. And most of all, thank you for mobilizing voters in battleground states, helping them to overcome the disenfranchisement measures to hold on to their power. An illegitimate power, which keeps the minority in control of our government. We are the majority, and I can tell you that you will not let that happen, because you are the future. Black Lives Matter, Planned Parenthood, March for Our Lives, NAACP Youth, the Human Rights Campaign, International Indigenous Youth Council, 50 Miles More, Voto Latino, Sunrise Movement, One Fair Wage, Future Coalition, and Operation Period. And you have come together today to imagine what working together could accomplish. I am so inspired by you all. You give me hope in what is one of the darkest times that I can remember. And I've seen some dark times. I became an activist during the AIDS epidemic when an American president would not even acknowledge its existence. We marched for our lives back then. And although it took us 30 years, the LGBTQ community celebrated the legalization of gay marriage just a few short years ago. Now we find those very rights threatened. And I can't believe the fight is not over. But with your energy and intelligence and political savvy, I know we can overcome this latest threat to our freedom, to speak our truth, and maintain our freedom to love whomever we love. So, my young friends, keep working. Stand up and hold on to everything you believe in. Decency, truth, science, and love. Your vote matters. Never forget that. And don't let anyone take that away from you. Go on and get them. And God bless.
Out in the streets, there is an intersectional movement growing. Our movement. We, the largest generation in the country. We, the most tech-savvy generation in history. We, the most tolerant, the most social, the most powerful generation in the country. We will not stay in silos. Ending systemic racism, gun violence, and bold action on the climate crisis will take us all. We know we have to stand with each other. We are 40% of all eligible voters, the largest generation in the country. When we all vote, we have the political power to demand the future we want. If the politicians don't act for our future, we will vote them out in 2 years and then in 4 years. And by then, we will be 50% of the voters. And after the election, we will be back on the streets building our movement and making sure the politicians work for us. It's our future, and our future starts now. Get vote ready to vote early.
Ain't no power, the power of people, the power of people outside. Okay? Ain't no power, the power of people, the power of people outside. Say what?
Hey there everyone, my name is Tonatiuh. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm an actor, a liberator, and a registered voter. Welcome to Reimagining Our Future. As 40% of eligible voters, we, Gen Z and millennials, have the power to create the future we want to see. The future we're demanding in the streets, and the future you will hear reimagined by activists, both BIPOC and LGBTQ activists, who are on the front lines fighting for change every single day. If you're on the fence about why voting matters, stay with us. And if you, like so many young Americans, were never taught how to vote, don't know how to vote, or are unsure or intimidated by the process, stay with us. Voting can be a little complicated, but once you know how to do it, trust me, it's not that hard. We're gonna offer you the information and the tools that you need to vote this week with confidence. But most of all, we hope that you stay with us to hear Thandiwe Abdullah from Black Lives Matter, Ariel Hobbs from March for Our Lives, Tatiana Washington from 50 Miles More, and Thomas Lopez from the International Indigenous Youth Council, and all the other extraordinary activists we have with us today. They're going to be talking about how we can create the future we want to see, why our vote matters now more than ever, and hear our generation speak truth to power about what's actually happening in our communities. And since this is a Truth to Power event, let's start with Bria Smith. For those of you who may not know who she is, Bria Smith is a 19-year-old Milwaukee resident studying journalism and film at Emerson College. She has mobilized Black youth in her community by advocating for inner-city gun violence prevention and reimagining oppressive systems. She has served as president of the Milwaukee Youth Council from 2018 to 2019 and has been a board member of March for Our Lives since spring 2019. Smith dedicates her activism to youth engagement and queer representation. It's activists like Bria Smith whose imagination, creativity, honesty, and compassion are what we need to create a future that is inclusive, equitable, and just. And now, Bria Smith will talk about how to be revolutionary. Take it away, Bria.
What does it mean to be revolutionary? Sometimes I think I ask myself this question too many times a day. I'm always very hyper aware of my moves, my movements, my presence in activism spaces, how I'm contributing to the greater good of Black liberation and Black Lives Matter as a whole. But that could be very overwhelming for a lot of organizers, especially young people, when you feel like you have the whole weight of the world and, moving towards for getting those answers on your shoulders, that you're trying to protect your parents, you're trying to protect your family, and even the future generation that comes in after you. But just a little help for those organizers who are feeling stuck in a funk of not really knowing what to do next, feeling conflicted with a lot of our systems that are in structure right now, systems in place that are always there to just oppress people of color, brown and Black people, and feeling like this fight is never ending. 1, I just want you to understand reflection, and 2, digestion, and 3, creation. But first, how could you reflect as an individual? It's really easy to just get stuck in always moving forward time, not going back into your past life and really holding yourself accountable or other people accountable for the things that we've done. Just this summer, me and my homegirls, we organized a 65-mile march in response to the George Floyd protests to stand in solidarity and get Milwaukee our liberation as well. When we organized a 65-mile march, we didn't know that we'd have so many disputes with the police officers. One mile into our march, only 1 mile, we were surrounded over police by 15 to 20 cop cars, some even unmarked. We had 2 infiltrators come into our march and try to talk to young people, ask questions where our location was, where were we headed, even offer sunflower seeds. And reflecting on that time, I remember just being so angry. Like, how could you guys? How could you try to infiltrate our movement? We're just children. We're just kids. Some of the young people that were marching with us they're not even old enough to vote in this upcoming election. And taking that anger as we were sitting outside, not having protection because of so many disputes with community leaders who didn't want to protect us in the movement. I remember looking outside the window and seeing my sister, by the kitchen window, and her standing out there too, just seeing if there's any white supremacists. And I was just so angry. Because how could we be living in the land of the free when Black children are so scared to even speak up on a national platform of change? And reflecting in that period, I knew that what I had to do as an organizer was to get this story out, to get a platform for organizers of color, Black organizers who are fighting the fight of liberation but don't feel safe to. Moving forward with digestion, hearing more stories as we were able to walk our 65 miles, or I won't even say walk, we marched and traveled 65 miles because there's so many different disputes with police and white supremacists and our safety being in danger. It was really hard to march the entire time. But hearing stories of other organizers and community members who came out to us and were so nice and were really protective, and they wanted to hear what we had to say. They wanted to hear our demands. They wanted to know what our mission was, to deliver our demands to our governor, to have him take an anti-racist stance, to make sure that he's making all Black Lives Matter curriculums mandated in schools, because we know that Black history isn't just for Black kids. Black history also aids white people, white children, all other communities, because it's American history. And even moving forward with that, like digesting these stories of how to move as a collective, hearing young people speak, hearing community members who have experienced trauma, have experienced the treacheries of the police officers in my state working within the system, who aren't giving them a chance to advocate for their lost loved ones. And even hearing the stories of young people wanting to reimagine our world, reimagine our system, reimagine community services, putting mandated reporters or therapists or specialists in servitude positions instead of police officers, not escalating situations of violence, not bringing a gun to a gun party, not making sure that our citizens, our constituents, our residents in our cities don't feel unsafe when a police officer gets out of their car and asks them what's going on here. I think it's really important to have that digestion principle to make sure that we're hearing other people speak, we're closing the proximity between us and other, and making sure that all stories, all representations of people, of self, of theory, of thought is being heard on a national platform, because that's how white supremacy modernizes itself and becomes normal, becomes normalized, becomes the truth, becomes our narrative as young people, as Black people living in America in 2020. And lastly, having that creation aspect. Now this might be a little hard. I'm still working in this right now. What do we want to produce? What do we want to create? What do we want our future generations to dwell in? Is it happiness? Is it more oppression? Is it liberation? Is it freedom? And for that, this can mean a lot of different things. Creating something could be your voice to power. It could be creating a new narrative of going to the election, writing your person in for the ballot, choosing a candidate, creating your new representation with the person that's supposed to be leading us into our movement. But for me, it's also creating something within your community, creating something within yourself. How are you going to move now? What are you going to contribute to? And it was really hard after the march when I was trying to get more young people who were engaged in the community, but a lot of people were just frustrated, so angry, because we have just politicians in offices, we have police officers in their positions who are just given a pass and not being held accountable for the treacheries that they're doing onto Black and brown people. And this could drive anybody into mania, into self-isolation, into feeling like their vote doesn't matter, that their ballot doesn't matter, that their voice doesn't bring you power, but in reality it does. Creating something that people can actually hang on to, creating a space for Black queer women, creating a space for those at the lowest point of receiving privilege, at the lowest margin of receiving privilege, giving them the capacity to speak about their issues and bringing their truth to power is how we're able to aid this liberation, move through this election, get young people out here to vote, get young people into the ballots. I think it's really important that we have more of reflection, holding ourselves accountable, reflecting on ourselves in different spaces, reflecting on things that we can do better, because not every organizer has the answers to moving forward. I want to talk more about abolition and reimagining our community services, dismantling racist structures that were in place, that were founded on anti-Blackness, that were founded on anti-gayness, and giving something else to the platform, writing it in with the community help, collectively with young people, digesting on these stories, and digesting on my trauma, digesting on other people's trauma, and even digesting the news feed that we're getting every day, the circuit of news. And if you haven't gotten sick after watching that George Floyd video, if it didn't make you disgusted enough to go to the polls, then I don't know what else will. digesting all these different things and moving forward with liberation and even creating something in the end. How are we going to heal in this time? How do we creatively heal? And promoting different types of activism like film and art and literature and fashion, because not every young person can sit behind a camera and talk about what needs to be done, or in front of a large body of people in a rally style and talk about politics. Like, we need to make sure that we're intersecting all types of voices, all types of visual aesthetics, and making sure that we're reflecting and digesting and creating. Because if you aren't aiding the liberation and the revolution as it is right now, then the liberation will leave without you.
Hi everyone, this is Selena Avalos with ECB for Change, founder and co-director. This year, I vote for a future where my community is finally heard at the local, state, and federal level. As we've gone throughout this pandemic for the past few months, we've seen how Black, brown, and white communities are affected by this virus. However, we've also seen how Black and brown communities are disproportionately affected. I've experienced this firsthand, seeing my mom wake up at 5 in the morning just to go to work in the agricultural fields, even as the pandemic is taking the lives of thousands of people. So this year, I'm going to the polls and I'm voting for my community to make sure that our voices are heard, because our vote is our power. So I encourage all of you to go out there and cast your ballot and make sure that your voice is heard. So let's go and power to the polls.
Hello, my name is Marcela. I am with Voto Latino, and I'm voting for a future where there's fair representation in all the branches of government.
Hi, I'm Alicia Novoa. I am with Future Coalition, and I am voting for a future powered by clean energy.
Hi, my name is Tomas Lopez Jr. I'm with Future Coalition and the International Indigenous Youth Council, and I'm voting for a future where Indigenous and Black youth can thrive.
Hi, I'm Manju Bangalore, and I'm with Operation Period. I'm the founder and executive director of the organization, and I'm voting for a future where every single person has access to quality healthcare.
Hi, my name is Jackie with Planned Parenthood Votes, and I vote for a future where every person has bodily autonomy and the rights and resources they need to thrive and have joy and liberation with their communities.
Hi, my name is DeAngelique Jackson. I am currently the president for the Fresno State chapter of the NAACP, and I vote for a future that establishes equity for all.
My name is Shamila Ruiz. I'm the communication strategist at One Fair Wage and One Fair Wage Action, and I vote for a future that includes a revitalized and equitable service industry where all workers are treated with dignity and respect on the job.
Hi, my name is Ariel, and I'm with March for Our Lives, and I vote for a future where Black and brown people don't have to worry about being terrorized by law enforcement every time they leave their houses.
Hi, my name is Armando Hernandez Jr., and I'm with HRC, and I vote for a future where every marginalized community is seen as equal under the law.
I vote for a future where all people are treated equal for the very first time in the United States, where Black lives not only matter, they are celebrated, where Indigenous cultures are preserved and their lands respected, where women are in control of their own bodies, and LGBTQ+ people are free to love and live in their authentic truths. I vote for a future where the communities suffering from systemic oppression are given the best chance to thrive towards the American dream that has been built upon their backs.
Welcome to Vote Club. Voting is not hard if you know how to do it. It can be complicated, and oftentimes that's by design, with the intention to suppress young voters, specifically young voters of color. So today, we're going to have some incredible panelists talking with us. We have Ariel Hobbs, Strategic Partnership Associate for March for Our Lives. We have Mercedes Woods, activist and student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And we have Tatiana Washington, Executive Director of 50 Miles More. You are all voters, right? Can you briefly tell me a little bit about how you became a voter? When did you get activated? What was your first experience like? Did you go with your friends? Did you go with your family? Paint us a picture.
I was nervous voting. It's kind of weird walking into like the polling places and having like all of these people there, and like in Texas, how it is like you have like polling booths like right next to each other, like back to back to back to back. And so like the only thing that's really blocking you from someone else is like the little like shade things. And so it was kind of weird for me because I felt like the person next to me was looking at what I was doing. So I kind of felt a little judged. But yeah, that was kind of my voting experience.
And my first time voting was last year in a local election. I was there right at 7 a.m. when the polls opened. I was the first person to go vote. I was super excited. I had on a cute little vote shirt. Of course, voting this year, this is my first time voting in presidential election, is looking a little bit different, you know, voting in my pajamas. I got my ballot, you know, gotta drop it off. So it's a little bit different. I don't get to get the cute, you know, Instagram. Well, I guess I still can, but I'm not gonna get the polling location, getting my cute little Instagram picture like I did last time. So, you know, my first time voting in a presidential election isn't as, you know, like, you know, special as I thought it would be, but I'm so excited that I have the privilege to exercise my right to vote because so many Black people don't have that. So
yeah, so my very first experience was actually when I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2018. It was for a local election, and I was incredibly excited. I spent the entire day like researching different candidates. I went to go see like, you know, their different stance on things. And it was just, I got my like sticker, which I was like really excited about. But growing up, voting wasn't a conversation. Again, in my public school, I went to school in a really rural town where it wasn't really a conversation. You know, it was something just to talk about, you know, the Constitution, you know, it's our right to vote. But it wasn't something that people were excited for. And then, of course, when I went home, my parents, they didn't vote. It wasn't something that they saw mattered. So when I moved to Milwaukee and, you know, joined the many nonprofits that I've been a part of, I slowly started to gain that confidence in not only knowing like my power in voting, but also being able to talk to others that our voices really do matter when we go to the polls.
100%. And I think if we really take into consideration the fact that we are the largest generation in the country right now, 40% of eligible voters, if we all vote, we can decide the outcome of this election. So can you guys talk a little bit about how do we speak to power and with voting with friends? Like how can we get our communities and people our age to come out and vote?
Really reaching out to young people and like engaging with us and not just trying to do like hop on trends and be like, oh, follow me, I'm on TikTok, I'm such this cool candidate or whatever, or like, look, I use this slang word or something like that, like, you know, you should vote for me off of that, but like actually touching on issues that affect us, like student debt, because I just recently graduated from college and I have an enormous amount of debt. So, you know, like talking about student debt and how you'll help us with that, you know, talking about healthcare, because, you know, right now you can stay on your parents' healthcare until you're 26, but for a lot of young people, especially in the pandemic, and we don't know how like long the effects of this pandemic will have on the jobs market, like really talking to them about like, okay, you might not be able to get employer-based health insurance. Like, here are some other viable options for you so that you aren't walking around as an uninsured person, so that like if you do go to the hospital or to the doctor or something does happen to you, like you will be okay, you know, and like really engaging with us on the issues that really will matter to us.
yeah, I think, and we've seen this, you know, the past, you know, over 3 months, young people being on the front lines, protesting and making their voices heard. And, you know, we go do that with our friends, and voting is another way for us to exercise, you know, our rights and to make our voices heard. So we should all go with our friends and encourage our friends to vote the same way we've been protesting on the front lines with our friends and our peers. You know, it's just voting is one of the many ways that we're involved in, you know, creating change for our communities.
So Mercedes, I want to propose this question to you. Even if students register, often only half actually vote. Can you tell us about the power of pledging to vote with your friends?
Of course. Great question, by the way. And I first want to say that I think there's a lot of obstacles that come into our young people, or that are presented to our young people when it comes to voting. Again, first, you know, when I was talking earlier, just the idea that this conversation isn't all the time normalized, especially like when we're in high school. There's this idea that like we need to learn like very specific things about our country, but there's no really conversation had about the importance of voting or the proper ways to make sure that we are able to vote in the like most productive way possible. And so I think when we talk about the idea of like voting with friends, we are also opening that door when we can actually talk to one another about candidates. Again, I was in a, speaking in like my own personal experience, I felt like as though when I was in high school and after I graduated, I was in this space where I had to know everything. There's like a certain way that I needed to present myself when going into, the real world. But the reality is like we need to normalize continuously learning. And so when we vote with our friends, we're also opening the door to, talk to one another like, hey, what are these policies? Like what are these candidates? And we should be able to have those conversations without being judged or being seen as less of, because again, voting is not hard, but it is complex. And there are systems that were created to make those complex and difficult for people to actually vote. And so with the Band of Voters, there's an opportunity where you actually sign up you and your friends to have these conversations about voting, and then be presented tools on how to lead discussions, like what does it look like to choose a candidate? What are their stances? There's just so many tools that are available, and it's so important. It is so important to vote. We need to normalize it.
No, I think it's super important to really cancel the shame around not knowing something, because the shame prevents us from actually doing the work to find the answer, right? And I think that when you work with your friends, when you're doing the research with your friends, there's many ways of doing it. You don't have to sit and write a research paper. You can turn it into a little party. I know a couple of my queer friends for the midterm election, they got together and then they gave each other assignments. You do props 1 through 4, you do props 5 through 6, and they all showed up in wigs and in dresses, and then we did like a full-on presentation for everybody. And so the idea is make it your own, have some fun, and by being with your friends, you can brighten up the space, and it doesn't have to be as complicated or as heavy. Mercedes, I would love for you to talk to us about outvote.io. What is that exactly?
So yes, outvote.io is an app that you can download, and through that app you can actually connect it to contacts in your phone, and from there you can see on who's voted in the past, and you can also see if you're registered to vote, and then even make a pledge to make sure that you vote in our upcoming election. And so I will say I'm not a super tech savvy person, even though I'm a young person, I'm a little on the not quite there on the tech world, but it's super easy to use, and it's just another way to engage with your friends and normalize this conversation of voting and getting to the polls.
Love it. So go to outvote.io, download the app, make a commitment with some of your friends to go out and vote. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to another incredible conversation. This time we will be exploring what a safe future looks like. We have some incredible panelists with us today, and let me introduce them for you. So we have Ariel Hobbs, the Strategic Partnership Associate at March for Our Lives. Thandiwe Abdullah, organizer of Black Lives Matter and the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Youth Vanguard. We have Junior Hernandez, who's a youth ambassador for the Human Rights Campaign. And we have Jackie Duron, the regional campus organizer for Planned Parenthood Votes. Welcome, everybody. Let's start this conversation because I know we have a lot to cover. So Thandiwe, what's happening in your world? What are you currently working on?
What are we not working on? There's so much happening right now in terms of the anti-Black violence that folks are experiencing nationwide, across the globe. I think we're trying as Black Lives Matter to do as much as we can. There's always going to be some folks who are like, well, why aren't you talking about gang violence and community violence? Why aren't you talking about like education equity? We're trying to do all those things.
Given the fact that we're all BIPOC here, Our communities are severely under attack, both economically and I mean, just even like walking while black and brown is a difficult thing. So as we're entering this conversation about safety, let's just take a few moments to talk about what safety means and how we're not there right now. So what is the reality that we're currently living?
Well, speaking in terms of the work that I do personally, we talk a lot about what public safety means currently, and what it should look like, right? We know that our current public safety is not what is keeping our folks safe. So Black, brown, Muslim folks, trans folks, disabled folks, right? We are the most vulnerable. And whether that be to law enforcement, whether that be to ICE, whether that be to the sheriff department, right? We are under attack. And so that means to us that the current system is not working and we're obviously not being kept safe. And it's really about who is being kept safe, right? It's keeping rich people safe, keeping white people safe, cisgender men, right, safe, at the expense of us and our folks. So when we're talking about what public safety should look like or what safety should look like, I usually tell folks, like, where do you personally feel most safe? Like, do you feel most safe with your community, with your family, reading a book, watching a movie? You know, when you're hurt, do you want to go to a police officer or would you rather have a full-time nurse in your school? Right? And so what are the things that actually keep communities safe, and not criminalize us and not kill us? So what we currently have, I think, needs to be completely reimagined, which is something that I don't think we do enough of. And I think that we've been conditioned to not do, is think outside of what we already know. But yeah, I just encourage everyone to reimagine what public safety looks like. Is that housing? Is that jobs, food equity, so that folks aren't living in food deserts, healthcare, access to, you know, social workers and psychiatrists, right? I think to me that is what safety looks like, and that's what justice looks like.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I would say there's so many ways that our communities need to be reformed, not only locally, but on a federal level, especially because so many marginalized communities are being threatened on the federal level because we're not protected under certain laws against discrimination, especially in our employment, our housing, you know, credit, education, public spaces. Federally funded programs, these are like areas of life that everyone has to, you know, see and deal with. And it's wrong for people to be discriminated in those areas because it's a threat to the most vulnerable and marginalized communities that live in our country.
Man, I definitely just want to echo the brilliance. All of these issues are interconnected, right? Liberation for the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, and the most historically exploited also means that we grow and everyone has liberation and has justice from there. So definitely want to echo that a future that is safe and equitable also includes getting access to things that make you happy and bring you joy. And sometimes we lose that in any kind of movement work that we're doing now. And I know it's something that especially Black lesbian feminists have been telling us, like Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, right, that joy is part of resistance and is part of the work. So a future where we have joy, where we have fun, and our communities don't have to worry about getting basic access to any resources is also a future that we're fighting for. And young people have always been at the center of every movement. And we're seeing that now, right? We're seeing everyone on this panel, we're seeing folks on the street, and they're often young people who are leading that fight and leading that charge.
The people that do typically turn out to vote are people of older generations, specifically older white people. And I feel like, you know, we as young people have to start taking our future back, because we will be the ones that like deal with the repercussions of these upcoming elections, because it's our future. You know, we're going to be the ones that to live and have to deal with, you know, like if no policies and strategies are enacted for climate change, like we're going to be the ones that have to deal with that changing climate and all the potentially disastrous and life-threatening, storms or natural disasters that may come. That's going to be our life. If we don't get equitable and affordable healthcare, we're going to be the ones that are going to have to struggle with kids or families and trying to make sure that we have like the right healthcare and the right healthcare coverage, and it's not putting us like $1,000 into the hole every time we feel like we need to go to the hospital or need some type of medication to make our lives easier. And I think it's important that we center ourselves on that fact that this is our future that is kind of in the hands of other people, and we have to stop letting our future and our wants and our lives be controlled by people that aren't going to be the ones to deal with it. That's not fair. And I would just like to stress that like this current political system that we have right now in America does not work. It is not the best. We have been stuck between the lesser of two evils for way too long. And, I'm not saying not to vote. I plan to vote in this election because I understand, like for me, that voting is important. But I think we have to look past November 3rd and understand and think of ways and strategize on like what we're going to do November 4th, regardless of who is in office. We have to understand that just because maybe someone that you would like gets elected doesn't mean that the lives of Black and brown people are going to automatically improve. It's not like, oh my gosh, a light switch goes off. Because both of these people have had histories and have histories of discriminatory and harmful practices that have negatively affected Black and brown communities for years. And so I think it's important to realize that and to make sure that we're not just stopping at November 3rd, that we're going past November 3rd and still making our voices heard, still being in the streets, still protesting, still petitioning, and still organizing and working to make sure that we all, as Black and brown people, as BIPOC people, have the best life that we can and the best life that we deserve.
You all have been activated at such young ages. I had a difficult conversation with my brother during the primaries. He just turned 18 and made it in time to vote then, but he refused to vote. He felt as though politics was divisive. He felt as though he wouldn't make a difference. And I'm seeing that there seems to be two trends. There's people who are young who are very activated, and then a trend of people who are young and like don't want to be a part of that. But what I was trying to explain to him is, as a brown person, as a Black or brown person in this country, your very existence is political, whether you like it or not. So what activations or what messaging can we, like, how can we reach out to young people to see the importance of voting and the power that they actually have?
I actually had a similar conversation with someone in my family just about a month ago, and they were mentioning the same things. It was kind of like, what if like my voice doesn't really matter, my vote doesn't matter? That's basically kind of what they were trying to say. And I was kind of just trying to explain that, vote because your vote does matter, especially in local elections, because local elections are the elections that determine your mayors, your county sheriffs, other local prosecutors, district attorneys, and it determines how your funding is going to get spent and distributed across the communities. That's something really important because it has a direct impact on you, your family, and the friends and people that you care and love for. Make sure that you're voting in local elections because those are also, very, very important.
I like to tell folks that voting is one tool in the toolbox of many tools, right? Like how we achieve liberation, how movements throughout history have happened is there are various tactics. There's various intensities of those tactics. And so voting is one way. And I always, something that someone said when I was younger was, there's a reason why folks in power don't actually want you voting. There's a reason why folks in power don't want young people, especially young folks of color, why they don't want Black and brown people voting, right? It's because they want to keep that power, and they know that voting is one of those ways that they can keep it. So how I have these conversations with other folks is, this is a way for us to regain some of that power. The work happens after November 3rd. The work happens after every election, and it doesn't just happen every 2 years when there's a midterm or a presidential, right? So
you have to see yourself doing this work past November. You have to see yourself doing this work past voting initiatives, past Instagram infographics and Black squares and all that stuff, right? Personally, I think that folks, this goes for anyone, but particularly people with privilege, people who are white, who are cisgendered, who are able-bodied, you have to see yourself with something at stake with any of the movement that you are showing up to support. So this is why I don't like the word ally, which is, it seems, it's a word that seems as if you get to decide whenever you want to join the struggle, right? It kind of implies that, yes, I'm lending you a hand, and I'm choosing to so graciously give my help to you. When in reality, we know that this work can only be done when all of us feel like we have something at stake with Black liberation, with Indigenous land back initiatives and justice work, right? We have to talk about how all of our struggles are intersectional and interlinked, and that none of us are free until all of us are free. You need to vote in your local elections, and you need to pay attention to things that are most impactful to you. I think that's something that's been intentionally not talked about, specifically because there is so much power with voting locally, right? Like, all of our systems are in bed together. If your police department is, killing the folks in your community, the DA is a part of that, the mayor is a part of that, right? The sheriff's department, all of them are working together, the unions, right? So you have to pay attention to what's going on, and do that literacy within your community and with the folks that you have the most access to.
Totally. And I think you're bringing up a really strong point here about intersectionality, right? All these things are layered on top of each other. And in order to have, let's say, climate justice or climate safety, we can't do that with recognizing the injustices that are happening in racial justice and racial inequity, right? So Ariel, I'm really curious, what do you see is important to build on an intersectional movement?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is respect. Sometimes when you're trying to be intersectional, you kind of get into these oppression Olympics, as I call it. And you're like, no, my struggle is way more important than your struggle. Or like, no, my struggle, what they did to me and my community is way worse than what they did to you in your community. And if you get caught in that discussion, that debate of like, no, mine was worse than yours, then you're not respecting each other. You're not respecting the fact that this country, both domestic and internationally, has done so much messed up stuff to communities of color all around the world. It is not isolated to people that are just on the continent of North America. It goes far beyond this continent. And if you get stuck in kind of your own bubble of like, no, this is what happened to my community, and it's way more important than anything else that happened to anybody else, you're being very disrespectful. And so if you want to be intersectional, which these movements have to be, you have to start off with respect and honoring and acknowledging the trauma and the pain and the oppression that other communities outside of yours goes through. And that is the only way that you'll be able to come to a common ground, because no one is going to work with someone that they feel like invalidates their story and invalidates their pain. And so that respect and honor is kind of the first thing that would come to mind. And then I think the next thing is honesty, and really being honest with yourself, because I feel like before you can really get to intersectional movement and start intersecting with other communities, you have to be honest with yourself about the trauma and the pain that you and your community has gone through. Because if you go into these conversations with a lens of, okay, this is the way that things have happened to me, and you're not really getting down to the nitty gritty of like, no, this is the traumatic stuff that has happened. Like, this is slavery. Slavery isn't just like, oh, they put people on a boat and they brought them to this country. No, they forcibly kidnapped, they forcibly went to another continent, kidnapped people, forced them against their will, shackled on a boat for month-long trips, brought them to another country, and then beat them into labor and basically compliance. And anytime they tried to do something about that, their lives or the lives of those that they loved or their family members was threatened. That's so being honest about what really happened. Because if you're not honest about what really happened, you're not going to get down to an actual solution to cure and fix and absolve what really happened. What was the cause of this? And so I feel like you have to be honest with yourselves before you can go be honest with someone else. And that way, when you have two groups coming together, being honest and connecting, not trauma bonding, but connecting with each other and actively working together to come up with solutions that would not just better themselves, but better other communities, that's how you're truly intersectional. And that's how you have a successful intersectional relationship.
So as we're getting closer and closer and working with each other, I think having these honest dialogue, having these respectful conversations and acknowledging it and then building something, what then can we do, especially your generation? I mean, our generation, really, we're 40% of the voting bloc this coming election, right? And so what tactics or what things can we do to really build power within our generation?
When I think like the 3 things that folks can do is educate, organize, and activate. So educate, exactly what Ariel was mentioning of what have your communities gone through, but also what are other communities going through. And you may not know their struggle, but you can at least understand and recognize that there's a commonality amongst all the issues, right? The same systems of power that are hurting the environment, that allow corporations to just kill our environment, is the same system of power that is allowing the police department to have such a large budget, right? It's the same system of power that is enacting abortion bans across the country where folks can't access basic reproductive health care. And sometimes the histories of all of our movements and our communities are actually not shown. So I think Ariel really walked us through the truth behind how the US was founded. But many textbooks actually try to erase that history. And who are the people making those decisions? They're your school boards, right? You can elect your school boards. You do elect your school board. So that, and the importance of local elections is not just is also because these folks are rewriting history, and that is a form of white supremacy. That is a form of different systems of power that are trying to reclaim the narrative for themselves, or really, I should say, establish the narrative that continuously hurts our people, and then organize exactly what Thandiwe, and everyone, Junior, Ariel, everyone else mentioned on this call, or on this panel, I should say, is organizing, building community, building relationships with other people. And voting is one way that you can then activate folks, that third bucket here. So after you build community with folks, and that can look like with your family, your friends, you already have established connections with people, and really being authentic with folks, you then have some kind of action that they can take where they're making an impact in their community. Mutual aid, it looks like an action. Donating looks like an action. Donating to bail funds, to abortion funds, to any kind of funds, or directly to people who need any of the money for any reason, mostly because the resources aren't there, right? And then voting. So particularly for young people, especially young folks of color, we know that our communities are very communal. We're family oriented. So making a plan to vote that includes other people. So
I think there's so many points that I kind of like want to touch up on, especially within like bringing communities together and having those honest conversations. That is so important, especially because being vulnerable is also something that is our generation, our younger generations are becoming more comfortable with. We're becoming more vulnerable within our own selves, our own bodies, our own minds, and our mental health. I think that's so important because we need to be talking about the things that are uncomfortable, having those uncomfortable conversations with respect, just as what Ariel had mentioned, because without respect, then there's no honesty without respect. There's no vulnerability without respect. And these difficult conversations lead to impacts in our communities, lead to better results, just better. Yeah.
For all four of you, what is a call and action to vote? Specifically for your organization, but you as a person as well. What can we rally people to come in and vote for?
A lot of my organizations that I work with have, we live in California. We are trying to bring back affirmative action. We know all the misinformation about affirmative action from the right, from conservatives, but we need to understand that affirmative action is necessary and that there are barriers within our systems of power that keep people from certain backgrounds, certain demographics out of higher education. And so we have to bring it back. If you need to do more research on that, I suggest that you do it. But I also suggest that you talk to folks who are the people being kept out of these institutions, Black folks, brown folks, Indigenous folks, and ask them how they feel about it. I think you're getting it from the source right there. And yeah.
I think that's so important, is getting it from the source. That's really what sticks with me, because a lot of people hear things like, oh, my uncle or like family told me this. It's kind of like, we need to be getting information from the source and learning about their stories, learning about their experiences, so you can feel what they had to go through. Recognize and advocate for our marginalized communities, which is our LGBTQ+, transgender, disabled, Black, Asian, Latinx communities. Vote for the marginalized communities. Vote for the people who aren't eligible to vote in our country. Vote for systematic change. Vote for the welfare of our country. And, just vote.
Presidential elections definitely get all the hype, all the media attention, all the glitz and glam, all the pomp and circumstance. Like, they get everything, It's like realize how important local and statewide elections are to their everyday lives, because those are elections that have a more immediate direct impact than a federal election will ever have, because that's just the way our country is set up. We need to make sure that we're using voting as the tool that it should be, which is the accountability check, because I feel like you have a lot of politicians that get to say a lot of pretty nice things and get to tell you all the things you want to hear and make it all pretty and fluffy. And then once they go into their office, they do none of what they said, or they do the direct opposite of what they say. As it was mentioned from the top, we're all BIPOC people, and we are the ones that have the most to lose from any election, whether it's federal, state, local, school board. We are the ones that typically lose in these elections, and we are the ones that feel the repercussions and the consequences of these elections faster and harder and stronger than any other community. And so I would just use that as your motivation to go and vote, and make sure you're voting all the way through the ballot. You're not just clicking whoever you want for presidential and then just being like, okay, I'm just going to let the ticket fill out itself after that. No, like, you need to do your homework and make sure that you're educating yourself on those people that you will be able to vote for, and make sure those people do have your best interests at heart.
I think it's really important to know who you're voting for, who is paying for them, who is endorsing them, and how they voted, because it's less about the words and more about what their feet are, where their feet are, and what actions they're actually taking. So what I'm curious is, what last things would you like to say to the young people who are watching right now? I sound so old saying that, don't I?
It's fine. We're all millennials and Gen Z here. I would say Vote because we are taking our power back, and this is one way to do it. Vote because our people need it. Vote because we have that power and we should own it and claim it. And how you do that is really just like there's so many resources to how you do that and really fight back against some voter suppression. So at Planned Parenthood Votes, we just released our youth voter guide that is available for young people, especially young folks of color in 10 states that tell you where your candidate or where the candidates lie across 5 issues. If you're going to vote in person, either early or on election day, and take a friend with you. Encourage a friend to go. Encourage your family to go. Your neighbor, right? Encourage everybody in your community to vote because this is one way that we're taking back our power.
I'd say my last few words of advice or call to action would just be vote and go beyond voting, volunteer to work at your local voting polls, phone bank with organizations, and canvass if possible. Just vote like your life depends on it, because for some of us, it does.
I would say just remember, young people, we do not always have to stand everyone that we are voting for. Politicians aren't perfect. It's almost as if it's a part of the job. Like Ariel said, it always seems like we're voting for the lesser of two evils. But you don't have to stand them, and they don't have to be celebrities, and they don't have to be your perfect ideal figure. And let's not try and make them into something that they're not. Let's focus on what serves us and what serves our communities and those most vulnerable in the immediate. And then we can focus on building from there and making sure that we're all doing our part to achieve the future that we want to see.
9 times out of 10, you won't like who you're voting for. They're politicians. It's a part of the job. I think, like Tandi said, a part of the job is being imperfect. I also think a part of the job is being unlikable in a way, because it's not a popularity contest. They're not there to be your bestie. They're not there to make you like them. They're not there to be voted like world's most favorite politician. That's not their job. Their job and what we put them in office for is to enact laws and policies that will better the lives of your community. That's their job. And so keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're going to vote. I would also say, look back at history and use history as your guide. And understand that it might just look like after 1965, the civil rights movement ended, but it did not. They didn't stop once they got the right to vote, and to really look and educate yourself on the history of marginalized groups in this country, and understand that it's always about moving forward. It's always about striving for the better, and it's always going to be about making progress. And we have to stop allowing our progress to be dictated by people that don't look like us and by people that will not be punished the way that we do. And that you take that with you in the voting booth. And that, one thing that I feel like this country's done a great job at is pitting protesting and voting against each other, when I really think they should work hand in hand. Because people don't want that momentum that we have on the ground into the voting booth. They're scared. They don't like that. They don't like that outspokenness. They don't like that we're challenging their authority. They don't like that we're questioning what they say. But you need to take that momentum that you have on the ground and put it into the voting booth, because they should be scared, if I'm being honest.
Protesting is our publicity, but the real work happens behind the scenes. It's in the organizing, it's in the calls, it's in the conversations, it's in the showing up, it's in the being vulnerable, the respect, and in the voting. And it is up to us as young people to not only fight for ourselves and the future that we envision for ourselves, the safe future that we envision for ourselves, but we owe it to the people who came before us, who kept pushing it so that we could be in the space that we are in today. I want to thank you all for the hard work that you have been doing out there. And I am deeply honored to be moderating this conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to Vote Club. Now, many people think about choosing candidates by whether they like them or like their influencers. Ariel, I've heard you talk about elections being about issues and not candidates. Why?
Because you don't vote on a person. It's not a popularity contest. It's not like, oh, I like her hair better, or I like that tie that he's wearing. Politicians, I think, especially in like the age of social media and election teams and campaign teams, like having such amazing like social media content and stuff like that, you get lost in wanting to see like, oh, I like this video that this person posted, or like, oh, look at this TikTok that this person posted, or like, look at this cool thing that they did on like their social media accounts. And people forget that they are elected officials. They are public servants. They are there to do a job. If this person has a past voting record, and they are an incumbent, that you're looking at their voting record and following, I guess, their paper trail, as you can, as a way that you can say it, and seeing like if they voted in ways that benefited your community or harmed your community. And they're just, when they're running for election, they're trying to tell you anything they need to do and anything that they want you to hear just to make sure they get that seat or get that spot, you know?
No, 100%.
But lives are at stake, you know, at every election, especially BIPOC lives, by POC people, because we are always the ones that feel the brunt of these elections. And so it's just important that you're educating yourself on the issues and picking your candidate based off that.
Yeah, and I first want to say Ariel really hit the nail on the head when talking about living in this world where we see candidates of like we see them on social media accounts, you know, posting like memes, you know, just all these different things, when in reality, like, they're here to serve us. Like, they have a job to do, and they're not, you know, we just kind of live in this like almost like celebrity culture where we see them and they need to be perfect, you know, they need to be funny, they need to look a certain type of way. And that's not how the world is. Like, that's not who these people, that's not what their role is in our communities. And so I also think the most hardest thing when it comes to voting is taking things surface level. You know, we scroll through social media accounts and we see this about a certain candidate, or they, you know, we see just one side of it, when in reality, there's so much more to candidates. You know, and oftentimes things on social media are completely biased and not always true. And so what does it look like to see something like that and get young people, especially young people, to do the research, you know, really get engaged, and not only be engaged with the research, but finding credible sources, you know, that are nonpartisan or bipartisan, but just really figuring out like who these people are. And so 2 websites that I found super helpful and you can use throughout the entire country is ballotready.org and vote411.org. And both of these websites are nonpartisan, so they're not trying to get you to sway for Republican or Democrat, but they're just there to give you the facts. They're there to give you what's going on with these candidates, and, you know, so you can make that decision based on their issues and not just looking at them for, you know, how many times they post on social media a day.
People are people, they vote how they vote. And I think when we focus on the specific issues and where they stand on them and the issues that are important for our communities, we can then make an educated decision as to who we're going to select and be voting for. Not team-based, not social media-based, but really, what is the effective change that they're proposing? Well, on that note, Tatiana, why are local elections so important?
Yeah, you know, I think local elections are really, really important, and it's unfortunate because I don't think there's as much information that goes out about candidates and about local elections as much as presidential elections. You know, when we vote for the district attorney, that's someone who's going to determine if killer cops are prosecuted or not. When we think about our city councils, they determine our city's budget and our funding, and whether the police, how much money the police gets. And our school board, they determine what, you know, if there's going to be cops in our schools, if there's going to be metal detectors in our schools. All these things really impact us directly, and that's such a huge impact on young people and how we go about our day to day. And it's just, we have to be informed and engaged in all levels of government and hold every
Now,
single elected official accountable.
There is a lot of misinformation about this election and most elections, but one thing is clear. This is about the issues, not the candidates. So how do you choose your candidates? Candidates are employees who enact legislation and policies on those issues. It's better to vote for someone who moves the needle a little than one who will take us back and lose hard-fought rights. So here's our tips. Identify the issues you care about most. Pick your top 3. Is it the climate crisis, racial justice, student debt, access to healthcare, the state of our education system, or not having a job once you're out of school? Then find out which candidates align most with your issues. A candidate is never perfect, but one will align more with the issues you care about than the others. And that's how you pick. Sounds simple, and it is, if you know where to look. So how do you know who's on your ballot? Nonpartisan guides like ballotready.org or Vote 411 are the easiest ways to find out. Planned Parenthood Votes has a great guide too. At those sites, you'll find sample ballots that you can print or fill out on your device so you're prepared to cast your vote. And in the same place, you can find information on the candidates' positions and records. And don't forget about the debates, where you can see the candidates live talking about the issues on their platforms. And if you're worried about potential lies during the debate, there are also many live fact checkers during debates, like at truth.org or at NPR. You can also check out factcheck.org that fact checks everything from press conferences to debates. So if you can dedicate an hour or 2 to research and go over your issues together, do it. This is our future. Researching with your friends allows you to share the work and have an excuse to get together, share info, and decide which candidates you should vote for. You can keep that private, of course. But if you and your friends don't have time to research in depth, you can check for endorsements by organizations either you or your friends support. An endorsement is a public declaration of one's personal or group support of a candidate for elected office. Organizations often have the staff to do deep research. Maybe you align with some of the organizations represented here today, so you can look them up and see who they've endorsed. Ballotready.org and Vote 411 also allow you to check for what's on your ballot in terms of ballot measures and initiatives, which are a form of direct democracy where you vote directly on legislation that, if enacted, affects our day-to-day. And if you're like me and you're a little overwhelmed by the amount of races on your ballot, remember that state and local elections often have the biggest impact on our everyday lives. Local elections can decide things like the budget and leadership of your police department. So for example, if you want your police department's budget cut, you have to vote in people who will enact those measures. That's your city government elections. And at the state level, state politicians can do things like deciding whether or not the state will accept Medicaid or end the Electoral College. These are critical times, and your voice matters. But what's the most important thing we can tell you? To those of you who are struggling to fill your ballot all out, you don't have to vote for everyone or everything on your ballot. You can leave sections blank if you just can't decide, and your ballot still counts. Voting for some is always better than voting for none, because this is your decision and your power to wield. The politicians, they work for us. We hired them, and we can fire them. It's really that simple.
Hi everyone, my name is Tonatiuh Folks and I'm an Andrew Goodwin Ambassador from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of what you need to know before you vote in Wisconsin. One of the most important things to know before you go vote in Wisconsin is to make sure that you have registered to vote. And one of the things that's really nice about living in Wisconsin is that we do have voter registration in person on election day at the polls. The best way to make use of this resource, though, is to early vote. Absentee voting is a little bit more risky right now since the Postal Service would be trying to mail a lot of ballots in before Election Day. So the best way to get your vote in on time is to go and vote early. In Milwaukee, for example, there are 16 polling locations available for residents to use, and you can find those polling locations as simple as just Googling early voting sites in your specific city. So one of the things that I'll recommend that you do before going to the polls is making sure that you have your Wisconsin driver's license. That is a primary form of ID that will allow you to vote at the polls, and if you go to My Vote myvote.wisconsin.gov. If you don't have a Wisconsin driver's license, then you can find all the other acceptable ID on that website. There are a few deadlines coming up for mailing in your ballot or turning it in at your polling location. November 3rd at 8 p.m. is when you need to have your ballot in by. And the most easy way to do that sometimes is simply to just walk it to your polling location. And so one of the things that you can do, once again, is go to myvote.wisconsin.gov and then enter your address. It'll tell you exactly where your polling location is. You can see who and what is on your ballot, and then you can decide who you're voting for. If you need to make a list and bring it with you to the polls, that is totally fine. But one of the things that we most importantly want to do is make sure that we're being informed when we go to the polls this year, and also make sure to tell our friends. So if you're going to vote, tell the people that you know, remind them of where your polling location is, give them the resources of myvote.wi.gov, and you can easily have access to the ballot. Don't be worried about long lines. People are usually just trying to social distance, but early voting and voting in person on Election Day is one of your best resources to make sure that your voice is heard. Thank you so much for listening to me, and please, please go out to vote in Wisconsin.
Hi, my name is Allie Nichols. I'm from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I'm a freshman at Temple University. Since I'm a first-time voter, I want to make sure myself and others are informed on how to vote in Pennsylvania. Although you can no longer vote early in person, you still have the opportunity to drop off your mail ballot before November 3rd, as long as you've applied for it before October 27th. Many great websites give a rundown on how to drop off your ballot, such as votespa.com. There, you'll be provided with the address to your ballot return location. Don't forget, you must return your ballot to a location in the county that issued your mail ballot. If you're like me and want to vote on November 3rd, it's just as important to know where you will be voting. On votespa.com, under first-time voters, there is a link to find your polling place location. This differs from mail ballot returns, so you want to make sure you type in your full address of your current residency. If you're all set, there's tons of other great resources that even show you the rundown on how voting works in your county. Once the day comes, don't forget your form of identification and your mask, and you're all ready to go. Have fun and be safe.
Hi everyone, my name is Alba from the Georgia Youth Poll Worker Project. I'm a current junior at Georgia State University, and I will be giving you your update to voting in Georgia. Early voting has already started. If you're planning to vote early, please make sure you get that done by October 30th. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. Monday through Friday until October 30th. Please check on your county's website to see which polling location is closest to you and go ahead and get that vote in. If you're planning to use an absentee ballot, please make sure you have turned in your absentee ballot by 7 p.m. on November 3rd. If you haven't sent in your absentee ballot yet, we would recommend you not to send it through the mail and just turning it in outside of a polling location at the ballot box. There's a ballot box that will usually be located outside, and you can just drop it in and have it at that. If you have requested an absentee ballot and have changed your mind and want to vote in person, please go to your polling location and speak to the precinct manager. There, they will cancel your absentee ballot. If you have already sent in your absentee ballot and cast your vote, you can't change your mind to vote in person. If you want to check the status of your absentee ballot, you can go ahead and check your tracking information for it on Georgia's My Voter page. If you plan to vote in person, please make sure that you bring a driver's license or any other government-issued ID to the polls. If you fail to provide proper identification, you can request a provisional ballot. You will have 3 days to bring proper identification to your county's registrar's office if you want to have your vote count. Please make sure to check Georgia's My Voter page online if you have any other questions or concerns regarding voting. The 2018 gubernatorial election exposed a lot of flaws in our voting system, and it will take a coalition of young people everywhere to go out and get their voice heard. This is our chance, Georgia. See you at the polls.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Tonatiuh, and we are back with an incredible segment on what a sustainable future looks like. Let's jump in and meet some of our incredible panelists. We have Marcela Fuentes from Voto Latino. She's a fellow. We also have Emily Gonzalez from the Miami Sunrise Movement Hub. We have Alicia Novoa, Director of Engagement for Future Coalition, and Tomas Lopez Jr., the co-founder of the International Indigenous Youth Council. Welcome, everyone. How's everybody feeling?
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
We'll start off with you, Marcela. what are you currently working on? What's going on in your world, and what are you seeing on the ground?
Right. Thank you so much. So what I'm doing is that we're trying to register people to vote through Voto Latino. As you know, we just hit the 500,000 on registering people to vote. So we're super excited for that. We're trying to as well host several panels so we can have like really good conversations about voting.
And what about you, Emily?
I'm just starting for Miami Sunrise Movement for a hub. This is something new. We just kind of started during this whole entire pandemic, and especially since the elections came. Florida, with this whole entire pandemic, they haven't really been responsible protecting the people, and this is where, with the elections and with everything that's occurring with Sunrise Movement, we really need to take action and need someone that's going to make the Green New Deal and is going to make this possible to have a sustainable future.
Alicia?
Yeah, thanks, Tona. So what I'm working on right now is a huge project called Vote With Us, which is a mass mobilization to get people voting throughout the early voting period through virtual and in-person events. And so it looks like a lot of different things. It looks like supporting people who are skating to the polls in LA and people who are using NBA stadiums to get out the vote in Texas. But it's really just a lot of, chatting with organizers on the ground and supporting them in any way that we can. And really this ties into sustainability because we're doing this work so that, all of the underrepresented communities of voters are able to, have a voice in our democracy and are able to push for the sustainability that they need and we all really need.
All right, and Tomas, what's going on in your world?
My name is Tomas Lopez Jr., and I am one of the co-founders of the International Indigenous Youth Council, as well as the partnerships coordinator for the climate strike with Future Coalition. Right now, we're very interested in really engaging communities and people that have historically been ignored and not really invited to the table when it comes to voter engagement and getting out the vote. So I'm very interested in speaking specifically to people that don't normally see themselves in spaces like this. I really do believe that in order to create the light, we're gonna have to step into the darkness and actually be the light in these spaces if we're going to have a record voter turnout in the upcoming presidential election.
Oh, I absolutely love that. So I'm really curious, and in your individual respective fields, obviously you're channeling and trying to uplift and awaken different communities, right? Especially marginalized communities. Why is that so important? Why is it so important to have people feel as if they're being represented? And how does that contribute to creating a sustainable future for everybody?
So I think it's very important to mention that Voto Latino is trying to register all the Latinx community, right? Like there are 32 million that are going to be eligible to vote in these elections. And there are as well 3 million young Latinx that are eligible voters for this November election. And we want them to have the finest tool and be empowered to go and cast their vote. And it's something that is very important because like a lot of the Latinx community, we moved to the United States. So our parents did not give us that education on voting and it's important for us to have fair representation. And I think like this tied together with that sustainable future because we want to know and let politicians know how we stand in certain issues. And by doing this, like casting our vote is the way that we can express to them like, okay, we're voting on these aspects and we kind of like, we like your policies because of this, therefore we're voting for you. And I think that's very important, like for us to be aware on how they stand on their issues and as well how they're gonna vote, right?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I really related to that, exactly what you said with the Latino community, Latinx community. And me personally, I live in Miami. And when it comes to sustainability, it personally like affects me how day to day, like houses are getting flooded, or when it rains, like there's really hard rain droughts and things like that. And if we allow for houses to be flooded, apartments to be flooded, like Miami could soon sink, and that's something that we do not want. And as Sunrise Movement, we are really working on our local mayors. We're really working on, especially like the elections. Like, it's not just, of course, like to vote for the right president, but it's also to vote for our local mayors that represent us, that care about us, that really want us to have a sustainable future, that we don't want sea levels to rise. And when you pass by like downtown in Miami, like you see like hundreds and hundreds of people without homes. They're all homeless. And can you imagine like how those people that do not have homes, and it keeps raining, and soonly Miami, it gets flooded. Like it could go up to like 6 inches of water. And we can just not allow this personally. It gets me very emotional, and I bet it happens to multiple other people in the Miami community, and we're just very tired of that. We need someone that's willing to represent us.
So as we're sitting here and we're thinking about voting and making change, I think it's super important for us to envision the world that we're trying to create. And with that being said, what does a sustainable world even look like? Any thoughts?
On my personal perspective, is that the world that we're trying to create, it's like where we have fair representation, where politicians focus on the good of the communities, where our world is not burning, honestly, that world, like the fires get control, and that we can like breathe this air without pollution. And I just hope that in the future our kids like have the same nature or even more nature than the one that we have, and that our voices are heard on all the political aspects, and that you can see like in all the branches of government, there's people that look like me and fighting for what I want.
For me personally, about having a safe future, I can imagine myself just, I've always lived, born and raised in Miami. And I just personally wish that, like, my dream is that I don't have to worry about, like, when hurricanes come, I don't have to think about, like, mostly like hurricanes or rain droughts or things like that. Like, I've personally been impacted personally with water coming into my home, and in the future, my dream is just I could go out, I could go safely. I don't have to drive going to locations. I could just ride a train or things like that, and I'm able to go and hang out with my friends. I could ride a train, bus, go to the beach or things like that without worrying what's going to happen with the environment impacts. And
a sustainable future is something that I really keep in mind, and is really what propels my activism. And to me, that looks like, a future powered by clean energy, a future in which our air is breathable and our earth is inhabitable, and, our environment is making a recovery, as well as, everyone feeling safe and secure and everyone's rights being protected, including that of having an inhabitable earth. And so, a sustainable future is really my dream. And I think that we should all be working toward our dreams and even voting for our dreams and, voting for this sustainable future that we want to see.
I mean, a sustainable future is all those things. To me, I like hear my grandfather in my head, and like a sustainable future is the return of the buffalo to the Great Plains. A sustainable future looks like streams filled with salmon. A sustainable future looks like air with nothing but birds in it. It looks like the protection of the caribou. It looks like the protection of the Amazon and all of our sacred beings in that entire body of land. When I think about a sustainable future, I think about life itself. When I think about a sustainable future, I see Black liberation, I see Indigenous sovereignty, and I see a return of the matriarchy. Because ultimately, every time we see a piece of pipeline laid into the earth, our women and Two-Spirit people are reminded of the day that they were assaulted. Because what we're doing to our women, we're doing to the earth. What we're doing to our sisters we've done to our mothers. And to me, a sustainable future looks like the return of balance to the world. And that's what I'm fighting for. That's what we're all fighting for. And so that's what a sustainable future will look like.
And so as we're exploring this idea of sustainability, I'm curious to know what you all think are some policies or actions that we need to take to get there.
I believe that the first thing, if you do anything, is start with yourself. Really begin to ask yourself the questions of who am I? Why do I do the things that I do? What is my connection to the earth and the world around me? Why does my decision not just affect me, but every single person around me? And once you can establish that, then you can maybe begin to move out and look at the small world around you. And then from there, move out again to the larger ring of people around that. But to me, the work that ultimately needs to be done is work that's on a personal level. Oftentimes we think that the only way that we can make change is by organizing a huge rally that gets hundreds of people there and a bunch of immediate attention. When in all reality, sometimes this work and the work that needs to be done is as simple as analyzing the way in which you treat people. And that might change your life so much that it has a ripple effect on everything around you.
That was so beautiful, Tomas. And I was just gonna add that, like, in terms of policy, which I think can be paired so perfectly with that idea of like individual responsibility. I think that we really need some ambitious policy to curtail the disastrous effects that we're seeing on our environment right now. That can look like a lot of different things. It can look like requiring, utilities to come from zero carbon sources. That can look like, an emissions tax. That can look like, banning the use of hydrofluorocarbons. So just a lot of different things that, our nation and, nations all over the world really need to, do to take action against climate change. And so that's kind of in the policy realm. But I also think that a huge idea that we should touch upon is, investing in clean energy and, divesting from fossil fuels and kind of shifting, where we're allocating funds and where, what energy we're supporting. So I think that those are some larger ideas in terms of policy and what we can do to create systemic change that pair along really nicely with what we can do as individuals.
You just mentioned something that is super important, and I wanted to jump into that because from Voto Latino made a research, and they mentioned like two of the most important issues that the Latinx community is focusing on. It's economy and healthcare. But I believe, like, as you mentioned, like focusing on where the funds are going, it is super important. And as well, we need to the next president is gonna jump into an economy that was affected by the coronavirus, but it's not only the thing that they need to focus on, right? Like they should be supporting some politicians and policies that want to like focus and know where like the money is going. Like they might be supporting like big corporations, but big corporations might not be focusing on how to reduce all of this waste and the production of like fast fashion. So it's something like by choosing like the right like politicians that do want to like create a sustainable future for all of us, like directing the funds where they need to be, what they are necessaries, instead of giving it to big corporations that are affecting our world, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was similar what I was going to say. It's that a huge policy, which Sunrise Movement, that's like what we're for. We 100% represent the Green New Deal, and that's something that we need automatically. Like we politicians, you see multiple other politicians, they go and they tell us and they're like, oh, like climate change isn't rising, like you see debates and they say that science isn't real, it doesn't exist. Like when we know we're being impacted by it, you need to know that like there are people that don't want us to have a livable future, and we cannot allow that. We are the youth, you know, we stand up for what we believe in. And with the Green New Deal, we find the right people that have what we want, that are there representing us, because we need 100% renewables ASAP. Like, that's our number one demand here. And there's, for the Green New Deal, it's something like not even a policy, it continues. Like, there's multiple things, a list of all the things that we need. And we need it ASAP, like we need it now, because so many things, sea levels are rising. You see the California wildfires, like we can't wait anymore. We need this, we need the Green New Deal right now. Yeah.
That's totally
Totally agree.
100%, without a doubt, 100% the point. And so as we're building the sustainable future, obviously this is an election year. Obviously we're here with a band of voters. Why is voting so important? Why is voting in this election so critical?
This year, it's so different than any other years. This is my first time ever voting, which I'm excited about. But there's two different candidates. There's one that says, let's have a livable future. And there's another one that says that science doesn't exist. You know, like, the point is that we just need someone that allows us to breathe, allows us to have fresh water, allows us to go out and have a normal future, you know?
I totally agree. Totally. I think like voting this election is extremely important. Like, we could see like all of these issues that our country is facing, like Black Lives Matter, like police reform, the Supreme Court nomination. Like, when we choose a leader from our nation, we're choosing the destiny from on something that is going to impact us through years. So it's important that we Latinx and all those like minorities communities go and cast our votes, thinking like who's gonna be representing us and who's gonna be thinking in what is going to benefit us, right? You know, like, this is affecting my future. Please, like, vote on my concerns.
We really have the principles of democracy at stake. You know, these issues like climate change that young people will have to shoulder the burden of for many, many years to come. And so this election is our opportunity to turn these things around and to really, you know, have a future that is livable, that is, you know, safe for everybody. And again, represents the values that we want to see. And in terms of local elections, I think, you know, a huge idea of vote with us and a huge idea in terms of voting in general is that locals know their community best. And so, you know, you really want locals, you know, getting out the vote in their communities. And even, you know, in high school, it wasn't, you know, the dean of the school who got you to register to vote. It was your friend who was volunteering at the voter registration stand who convinced you to register to vote. And so it's all about peer-to-peer, you know, get out the vote, relational organizing. And so that ties directly into, you know, locals getting out the vote in their own community, as well as young people reaching young people. And so what we're trying to do through Vote With Us, and I think is such a huge, you know, idea for this election, is again, you know, empowering locals to mobilize their community, as well as, you know, popularizing voting and making it a thing for young people to vote, you know, with their friends, and, you know, something that is normalized and a responsibility for all of us.
I think a lot of the times people think voting is only like voting for the president, and we forget that like there's so many other things that are on the ballot right now that are super important. Things that are bringing up conversations about the Electoral College. You know, one of the main reasons why young people don't want to vote is because F the Electoral College. Like, seriously, what is that even? Like, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't fit who we are as modern people, you know, in 2020, soon to be 2021. And people don't know that. People think that they're just voting for Biden, or they're just voting against for Trump or against Trump or whatever, you know. But when you start to dive deeper, what you begin to realize is, you know, there's so many other really important things that are affecting so many people on such a personal level that we need to be voting for. The other important thing is that you shouldn't just be voting. If all you're doing is voting, you're only doing half of the work. We need people showing up in the streets still. We need people when the Black movement for Black Lives makes a call, we need people on the ground, especially our white allies. So just know, you're not just a band of voters. A band of voters is also a band of warriors, and warriors do everything in their power to protect their people. So I think it's important to really understand that, like, this is a double-edged sword. We need to be using the power of civic engagement and mobilization and pairing it with the power of voting to really, truly harness the full power of this, like, democratic system, as it's called.
The reason how I joined Sunrise Movement, and Sunrise Movement Miami, was the power of unity. Like, it's all of our, their age, we're the power of Gen Zs, millennials, we contact each other through social media. You scroll through TikTok day to day, you scroll through Instagram and things like that. And we have that power of connecting virtually, and especially now during this pandemic. I feel that we don't know each other, but we certainly can, and we could become a family without even knowing it. We all have that same message at the end of the day. We want to have a livable future. Most of us want the Green New Deal too. We need someone that cares about us, someone that's willing to protect us and just have fresh air, things like fresh water, things like that.
One thing that Voto Latino is focusing on is we have our text banking, and this program, it's we're reaching out to millions of Latinx and first-time voters. This is to make sure that they have a plan through their elections. And as well, if you go to our site, we mention all of the issues and how to vote. And it's very important that you plan on voting and mobilizing people to actually go and cast their vote, because that's the only way that our voices are going to be heard.
So I totally agree with what you both said. I definitely think that for this election, we all first and foremost have to vote. And then after we vote, or in the midst of our vote plans, we really have to engage our community in voting and, civic engagement in general. So, that can look like inviting a friend to go vote with you, inviting a friend to come do research on the candidates on your ballots with you. And so, going that next step beyond voting to engage others, engage your community, and, take that next step after voting.
The only thing I would add is I just want to make sure that everybody's also putting forward a level of safety and caution while we're moving through this time and space. Yet what we as community organizers are doing is super inviting and safe for anybody, no matter who you're voting for, but that is not the same for the people that are around us. And so it's important that we are protecting ourselves physically, but not only physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. There's this space that we're in right now is very unhealthy, and it's very toxic, and it's very difficult to manage. And so it's important that we're breathing, that we're drinking water, that we're eating healthy, that we're getting sleep, that we are doing things that are fun and feed our souls and our hearts and our spirits, and understanding that that aspect of this is just as important as getting out the vote. And so I ask that everybody just really take the time to care for yourself, and in doing so, care for the people around you, because we're gonna need each other in this. We can't do this alone. And that is just the reality that we have always faced. We need each other, and we need each other in their fullest that they can possibly be.
As we move forward, I know that the world is literally on fire at the moment, but we can push through it together. We have to have each other's backs. This is our world. We get to decide, and we get to create the future that we want, whether it's for racial justice or sustainability. We are here for each other. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I love you. And don't forget, go out and vote.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn from the University of Iowa, and I'm the founder and executive director of Hawk the Vote.
And I'm Diego. I'm from the University of Miami in Florida, and I am one of the founding members of March for Our Lives. Are you anxious about voting? Have you never done it before? Our advice, make a vote plan. A vote plan is a simple and easy way to know how, when, and where you're voting. It's a step-by-step checklist to make voting easier. That way you don't have to leave it for the last minute, get anxious, or worse, miss your chance to vote.
So let's start. How are you voting? Are you voting by mail or at the polls? If you're voting at the polls, figure out when, where, and who you're voting with. Write this down or set a calendar reminder for the time, date, and friends you're bringing.
In some states, you can even ask your boss for time off. Remember, it doesn't have to be on election day. You can go vote early and get it all done way sooner. Just find your polling place. You can do this by going to vote.org.
So plan what to bring, from voter ID to some snacks, water, games, and even friends, because you might have to wait in line. Make it as much fun as you can.
Yeah, my friends on campus, we all go together and make a lunch out of it. We grab food, we wait in line together, and we talk about the different races that we know about, and that makes me feel way better when I get into that actual polling booth. But voting early is best if you can. It usually means shorter lines. And remember, do this as soon as possible. Get it off your chest. One less thing to worry about. My favorite option is to just drop off my completed ballot at my county clerk's office or at a Dropbox location. You can head to check for your county's location, or you can just drop it off at a polling place on election day, or even at an early voting center.
And that's it.
You're done. Celebrate.
Maybe text a friend or two and tell them how easy it was to make your voice heard. Tell them it's important that they vote too.
You can relieve any anxiety about polling by phone banking also if it's still getting at you. Or just chill. You voted. We are building our power.
Hello all, it's Ariel Hobbs and I'm coming to you from Houston, Texas. As we all know, we're in the middle of a very important and intense election in our nation's history. Currently, early voting is still going on in Texas and will continue until October 30th. You can find all the necessary information regarding your nearest polling location and their hours of operation on your county clerk's website. Note that it is too late to mail in your ballot, and there is one mail-in ballot drop-off site per county due to the mandate by Governor Abbott and his efforts to suppress the vote in Texas. To find more information on your mail-in ballot drop-off site, go to your county clerk's website. Also note that in Texas, you can early vote anywhere, you just need to have an acceptable form of identification. An example of an acceptable form of identification is a driver's license, a Texas state issued ID, or a U.S. passport. A student's ID does not fall into this category.
Hi, it's Jocelyn Roof from Hawk the Vote, the University of Iowa's student-led initiative to get students registered, educated, and turned out to vote in local, state, and federal elections. I'm happy to be here with you today to tell you a little bit more information about how to vote in the state of Iowa. First off, early voting in person is a great option and is going on now in most counties until November 2nd. To find more information about locations, dates, and times, you should look to your local county auditor's website for more information. It's too late to request an absentee ballot, but if you already have yours, there's a few things you need to do to be sure your absentee ballot is counted. First off, make sure you do sign and seal the envelope, sign it in black ink, and you can turn it in at the county auditor's drop box or drop it in the mail. You don't have to add any postage or any envelopes, it's all included in the state of Iowa. Lastly, you could vote on election day. If you choose to vote on election day, be sure to take proof of ID and proof of residence. Your ID could be your driver's license or a tribal ID card or document, a military ID or a passport, and proof of residence is a lease, a utility bill, a government document with your address on it, or if you're on campus, your housing agreement with the university. That's basically all you need to know to vote safely. Thanks for listening and happy voting.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Gordon. I'm a student at Eckerd College, and I'll be giving a quick update on how to vote in Florida. So first, vote by mail. The deadline to request your vote by mail was October 24th, so it is too late to do so right now. However, if you already have your ballot, it is also likely too late to mail it via the U.S. Postal Service, but you can drop it off at a number of drop-off locations. You can find those locations by going to your Supervisor of Elections website in your county. You can just Google the name of your county followed by Supervisor of Elections office to find your local page, and that will tell you all of the mail-in ballot drop-off locations in your area and the ones that are closest to you. So next, voting early and in person. The times and dates for voting early depend per county in Florida, so your best bet there is to again head to your local Supervisor of Elections office website. Again, you can just do so by Googling the name of your county followed by Supervisor of Elections. This is absolutely the best way to find the dates and times that are specific to your area. So the final way you can vote in Florida is on Election Day, November 3rd. The polls in Florida are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you are in line by 7 p.m., you will have the opportunity to cast your ballot. Head to your Supervisor of Elections office one more time to check all of the polling locations in your county and to find the one that is closest to you. In Florida, you need a signed photo ID to be able to vote. So this could be a driver's license or a passport, for example. As long as you have a photo and a signature, you'll be good to go. So if you have a photo ID that is not signed, you will need to bring another ID that is signed. So for example, a debit or credit card that has your signature on the back doesn't have a photo ID. But as long as that is coupled with something with your picture, you will be able to vote. The final really important thing to note is that felons who have completed the terms of their sentence, paid off restitutions or fines, and are registered to vote can vote in this election. Returning citizens can find more information at freeourvote.com. Thank you so much, and let's get out the vote.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to a wonderful discussion today on what an equitable future looks like. My name is Tonatiuh. I'm an actor and an activist, and we have some incredible guests with us today. We have Manju Bangalore, the founder and executive director of Operation Period. We have Tatiana Washington, the executive director of 50 Miles More, DeAngelique Jackson, the president of Fresno State NAACP, and Shamila Ruiz, the communication strategist of One Fair Wage. Welcome, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to have you all here. You all have done some incredible work and are continuing to do some incredible work. But instead of me mansplaining everything, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about your project. So Manju, tell us, what are you currently working on?
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be on today. As you mentioned, I'm the founder and executive director of Operation Period. And we do 5 things at OP. We do art, advocacy, education, community engagement, and aid. So in terms of what we're doing a lot right now. Art, we're working on a billboard campaign and creating a zine that's going to be published in the next few weeks, encapsulating a bunch of artwork from different menstrual activists. In terms of advocacy, we're working at the campus, federal, state, and local levels to get menstrual health legislation passed and policies implemented, like free menstrual products in the women's, men's, and gender-neutral bathrooms, as well as other policies and legislation. Education, we're working to create curriculum to be presented in middle and high schools, as well as creating educational booklets for folks in Guinea, Somalia, Kenya, Bangladesh, and India. And community engagement, we have a podcast that we're starting. We have a book club that we've been running for a few months. And we have panels and Instagram lives that you can come watch on our website and on our social media. And then last but not least is aid. So to date, we've given out over 200,000 menstrual products. And we are continuing to do more and more every month with our school clubs donating menstrual products to their local homeless shelters, Planned Parenthoods, etc.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. My name is Shamila Ruiz. I'm the communication strategist at One Fair Wage and at One Fair Wage Action. We're a national nonprofit committed to ending sub-minimum wages in America. We believe that everybody in the United States should earn a full, fair living wage if they're working in the United States. We do this through 3 ways: through policy shift, through narrative and culture shift practices, and through industry shift. And we currently have a relational voter program that we're using to get service industry professionals. So that includes nail salon workers, restaurant workers, car wash workers. Restaurant workers are actually the largest sector of tipped workers in America. There were nearly 14 million restaurant workers pre-pandemic, and there are 6 million of them who rely off tips for wages. And so right now, during the coronavirus pandemic, we've seen an unprecedented rates of unemployment and of folks being in crisis. We launched back in March an emergency fund to aid any service industry worker who needed help and who wasn't getting unemployment insurance by giving one-time cash grants, but more importantly, connecting them to resources in their cities and in their states. And we're also actually now launching through our relational voter program a way to hire these out-of-work restaurant and other service industry workers to do relational voter engagement. So previously, in past elections, restaurant workers have voted at about 14%. And so we're really working to change that, especially in key battleground states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where we've been organizing for a full fair minimum wage in the legislature for some time and are now using those networks to drive folks to vote and to have their voices heard. So glad to be on and contributing to this conversation with all these other amazing panelists. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is DeAngelique Jackson. I currently serve as the president for the Fresno State chapter of the NAACP. I also serve as the third vice president for the California-Hawaii State Conference Youth and College Division, as well as a national civic engagement trainer for the NAACP Youth and College Division. So our focus within the NAACP and explicitly the Youth and College Division of the NAACP is to bring awareness and to advance the economic, educational, social, and political status of African Americans and the Black diaspora, as well as other people of color and minorities. It's also just to make sure we are developing intelligent and effective youth leaderships to come into the world and to try to make it a better place. Our 6 game changers, or our philanthropic thrusts, have to do with voting rights and political representation, economic sustainability, education, health, juvenile justice, and Vote 2020, where we focus on just increasing the amount of youth voter turnout, as well as increasing education surrounding voting and civic engagement for our youth.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be on this panel with so many amazing other women. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and 50 Miles More is an organization that really believes in direct action to organize around a plethora of social justice issues. We just did a 65-mile march demanding that our governor and other elected officials take an anti-racist stance. And we really believe in uplifting the most marginalized voices, the most voices that are going to be most impacted by policy. So we really believe that it's young Black women that should be leading this movement. It's Black trans women that should be leading this movement. People with disabilities should be leading this movement. We really try and center the most marginalized voices, the voices that are going to be most impacted by policies in our work. And we just really believe in building community. And, what we've really been working on, we've seen the National Guard and police using rubber bullets and tear gas on peaceful protesters. And that's something that we've really been trying to support protesters on the ground, on the front lines. Some of our folks are on the front lines protesting. Currently, right now, Wisconsin is the epicenter for COVID. And to see our government just accepting the fact that we're okay with tear gassing folks in the middle of a pandemic for peacefully protesting police violence, it's very upsetting. That's really something that we've been pushing for, to get tear gas and rubber bullets removed from our streets. It's really demilitarize our streets.
So clearly we're working at many different intersections between climate justice, racial justice, sexual justice. And so what I'm curious to know is, what is your organization doing to intersect and bring these things forth?
Yeah, I so appreciate this question. I think it's really important to be intersectional about it. A lot of times, I think the name of our organization can be deceiving. We're pushing for one fair wage, but we know that economic justice is racial justice. We know that achieving economic justice in America is a gender justice issue. About 70% of tipped workers are women or women identifying. A lot of them are single moms. They're working at IHOP, Applebee's, Denny's. They are working at family style, casual restaurants all over the country, and they're being forced to live off of sub-minimum wages and forced to rely on tips at a time where they literally have to be health marshals, enforcing customers to wear their masks and putting up with all sorts of violations as it relates to health and safety because of this COVID crisis. We know that achieving a full fair minimum wage is a racial justice issue. It's important to name that up front. The concept of a sub-minimum wage is a literal legacy. It's a vestige of slavery. It was brought over. The custom of tipping was brought over right after emancipation, and it was a way to hire newly freed slaves and not pay them anything at all, but have them live off of customer wages. There's folks who are making $2.13 at the federal level in 43 states that deferred to the federal minimum wage. In Massachusetts, where I live, we're at $4.95, and folks have to live off of tips. Now, your employer is supposed to make up the difference, but there's an 84% non-compliance rate. And I'll just end with one thing. We recently did a virtual town hall with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and she said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about for the last few days, which is that we have to be intersectional about it. And I'm going to quote her, these intersectional injustices are not naturally occurring. They've been legislated and they've been codified. And so if we can legislate hurt and harm, creating marginalized communities, then we can also legislate communities that are equitable and just, where everyone can thrive. And I've been thinking about that a lot. So
right now, I think the first and foremost thing that we need to talk about is what is happening to Black people in this country. I am a non-Black person, so I constantly looking at ways at how I can serve as an accomplice to Black people and the fight for liberation, which is why at Operation Period, we've adopted a abolitionist lens and a decolonization lens to our work to make sure that we are addressing the criminalization of all menstruators, regardless of gender, and honing in on the criminalization of menstruators and what that looks like in prisons and in policing. So that's why in our book club, we're exploring abolition and how menstruators are being treated in incarcerated situations, as well as in places where they're not incarcerated. We're looking, we have mandatory readings for all of our staff members and all of our club leaders to make sure that they are on the same page about what it takes to achieve liberation in this country and what that actually looks like.
Yeah, so for us, I would say our goals are pretty aligned with what Manju is working on. So we, in terms of just police violence, police brutality, the NAACP has really been at the forefront of this, hand in hand with the Black Lives Matter movement and Black Lives Matter as an organization. So I guess for us, what you see a lot of NAACP youth doing in their respective cities, they're leading these different movements in collaboration with other organizations. I know since the tragic murder of Hunting, honestly, of Ahmaud Arbery, that really kind of sparked off this campaign that the NAACP has taken on called We Are Done Dying. And you've really just seen the Youth and College Division of the NAACP shine. When they say that this is a youth-led movement, you can definitely see that as a reflection reflected within the NAACP. So on my side, on the ground that I'm walking on currently in Fresno, California, we have also been at the forefront of that. On May 31st of this year, we hosted the largest, most peaceful protest the city of Fresno has ever seen, with over 3,500 attendees, all coming together under the name of We Can't Breathe. And it was just a phenomenal experience for us to go through as a collective, especially as Black people, because we make up we're such a minority within the city. We're only about 6% of the city's population. So for us to come out, to be such a small percentage of that march, but to be at the forefront of it, to be the focal point of it, and to know that we have so many allies that are willing to ride with us was something that was phenomenal for us to experience. Fresno, California is extremely conservative, and that doesn't always mean that you are racist by default, but a lot of the times, for some reason, the two go hand in hand, and Black people out here are not safe in a lot of areas that we travel to. So that was something that was dangerous for us to do, as it is for Black people in a lot of areas within our country. And just for us to come out and see some noticeable, real progressive change within our cities was just wild to think about. Especially given that like Trump's 3 largest donors come from the Central Valley of California.
For sure. You know, we're an openly all young women, all LGBTQ plus folks in our org, in our march. And with that came extra consequences while we were marching. You know, we not only faced backlash, of course, while we were walking in, rural Wisconsin, from conservative white supremacists, but also from some folks in our community, who don't agree that, young women should be at the forefront. They weren't okay with our messaging. But one thing that we really care about and something that we really want to make sure was that everyone's able to be themselves authentically 24/7, no matter what was going on. Proud to be Black, proud to be a woman, proud to be non-binary, proud to be trans, whatever their identity was, we wanted to make sure that was at the center of our march. And that's why I think one, all of our marches became super close to each other. There's only 13 of us. But two, like why we've been so sustainable 2 months later, we're still, you know, building communities, organizing, is because that's at our centers. Like we're proud to be who we are, no matter what we're going through, no matter what's going on. We're gonna make sure that our identities are known. And I think that's something that's very powerful for me to see, you know, 17-year-olds, you know, it was only 17 to 24 years old marching with us, and to see them, you know, so proud to be who they were, even if you see like a Confederate flag driving by or someone calling the N-word, they're in rainbow tutus dancing, and that was just like so inspiring to see. And I think we're really just seeing like this solidarity and like this community that's happening. Yeah.
And the importance to do so unapologetically at that. I think that that's such an amazing thing for me to hear. That's just happening across the country. That's just beautiful. I love that all the way. Like, I'm a fan.
So what I'd love to know is, what does an equitable future look like for you?
My vision for the future, especially in the menstrual health and reproductive justice space, is every person who has a uterus has bodily autonomy and has full control and ability over their body, and has full access to healthcare, quality healthcare that actually helps them and provides for them.
Yeah, you know, I want to see community gardens on every corner. I want, you know, to see schools, beautiful schools for our students and our kids to go to, and they can learn that they can be whatever they want to be. I want to see, you know, less prisons. I want to see no prisons, but I just want us to completely reimagine our future and like, what does that look like? I wanted to talk about what does public safety actually look like, because currently what we have right now isn't it. There's so many things, and it's like we can literally just like reimagine and redo really our whole future. We have that ability. I know that sounds like a radical act, but it really isn't, because someone decided this is the way that our world is supposed to be, but it's not. You know, we should all be able to go to the doctor without worrying about fees. We should be able to go to school and feel safe. We should be able to go home and feel safe. There's so many things that we can just literally reimagine. I guess that's something that we've really been pushing, is like just reimagining not only like our community but also our world, because we know that our liberations are tied within each other. It's about, you know, my black siblings abroad, and it's really a global struggle, and just reimagining what does solidarity, what does community look like, I think is something. And I don't have the full answer. It's just I want us to reimagine. And I know that we can have such a beautiful future ahead, and it takes all of us to be involved. So
yeah,
you know beautiful. What? And I like, Tatiana, we are right here. Can I ask you a question, if you're comfortable letting me know, like, what age group are you in? I'm 22.
I'm 19.
You're 19. Okay, so check this out. So when we talk about Gen Z, Gen X, right? I believe I'm that first group of Gen X, I want to say, or it's Gen Z, like 1998 to 2000, whatever. So like when we talk about the evolution of the Black Lives Matter movement and just of activism, period, like you and I are the forefront of what our younger brothers, sisters, siblings are going to be coming into. So like what you're talking about is the same thing that I'm looking for out of my organization and out of my local community. In fact, so I serve on what's called the City of Fresno's Commission for Police Reform, and our whole focus is literally reimagining public safety. So what you're talking about is actually something that we can work to implement, and it's something that you could do in your city, same way I'm doing it in mine. And it started with the same things that we're all talking about, right? So we're talking about access to healthcare. And in my city, it's very, very segregated. And I wish I could use a different word, but because of redlining, because of highway building, like I promise you, if you look at the way all of your major highways and freeways are set up in your city, at the intersection of that, literally in the middle, what you'll see in Fresno, California, that's usually where most of your poverty exists. And for us, it's no different. So because of redlining, because of segregation, you have in the southwest, west side of Fresno, right, over 50% of the residents there are living within poverty, whereas in the rest of the city of Fresno, only about 25 to 27% are living below the poverty line. In West Fresno, we don't even have any type of like accessible healthcare. So like those that can't afford like to go to emergency rooms and things like that, they don't have easy access to it. There's no credit unions in West Fresno. There's no food banks. It's a complete food desert, right? And when you talk about police brutality, For the City of Fresno's Commission for Police Reform, I'm the chair of the Community Input Subcommittee. Our job is literally to poll the residents of the city of Fresno to see how they feel about policing in our city, police brutality, police reform. And what we find in those most segregated areas where our Black population is the biggest, there's a lot of distrust. Like literally over 50% of the residents in the entirety of the city of Fresno said that they don't trust the police, that they're not satisfied with their performance. And when you look at how our homeless community members polled, theirs is like 70 to 80% are feeling the same way about that. We have an Office of Independent Review in our city, and their job is literally to act as like a liaison between the police department and the citizens, and to pretty much say, hey, when the police department commits a crime, right? We have a case of a young man whose name was Isaiah Murrieta Golding, who was shot in the back of the head while running away from police officers. And his case recently came back, and they said the officer was justified in what he did because it was a high intensity situation, and the officer was reacting in terms of fear. But it's like that independent reviewer really has not been doing their job. We asked residents how they felt, and it's like almost 80% said that they weren't satisfied with the job or they didn't even know the office existed. So when we're talking about reimagining public safety, it's the same things of what you're talking about. We have a park that's in the west side of Fresno called Hyde Park that's literally built on top of a toxic waste dump site, and it's been there for the last 40 years. So you have people of color, predominantly Black people, who are growing up playing on that park, growing up with adverse, health disparities. Like the amount of Black women in this city that are dying, giving birth, or that you have like young Black children dying before they're even born is like 3 times as high for Black women than it is for anybody else. The same is true for like our Black children, just in terms of disparities. Like Black children are like 4 times as likely to be detained and 3 times as likely to be arrested, I believe, by the police department out here. So it's like it really is something that we can reimagine. How do we get those health clinics into our poor neighborhoods? How do we combat the effects of redlining, of segregation, right? And put that back into the system in a way that doesn't lead to gentrification for communities of color. And it starts with people that are like you and me, right? Like I said, we are literally the up and coming generation. So the things we're talking about, I promise you, by the time our little brothers and sisters and siblings are our age, they can see that and they can continue the vision. So I don't know, it's just exciting to hear you talk about that.
So all of you have achieved some incredible feats for such a young age. Just actually incredible feats, period. For those viewers who are out there who feel a little disempowered, what things can they do to make action now, to help create this future?
So the tips that I have for young people wanting to make change in their communities are finding the causes that they're passionate about, whether it's racial injustice, gender injustice, reproductive justice, whatever the case may be, and then seeking out organizations that are doing that work and simply asking them if you can join and help within the fight. I think that's all it really takes, is asking. Asking is such a powerful thing to do, and there is not one organization I can think of that doesn't need help. So just go and ask, and I'm sure they will say yes.
When I think about the future, I always envision equity. I think that equity should become a part of our regular vocabulary and should become a part of our plan for pushing forward to the future. Because equity is kind of like it meets at the intersection of equality and justice, right? It's not just giving everybody the same thing. It's not doing what's necessarily right. It's making sure that you're meeting people where they are because it's the moral thing to do. So instead of meeting somebody one place and then giving them the same thing that you would give somebody somewhere else, you provide them the needs that they require in order to excel, or even just to sustain themselves, right? So when I think of equity, it's like taking the people at the bottom, where by my philosophy that lies at the intersectionality of everything, including all of the intersectionalities, I should say, includes at the base Black people, lifting them up to make sure that we're on an even plane, and then allowing us all to rise together as one, making sure that you're not establishing another bottom tier, but instead creating literally a flat plane. And I think the way that young people around us can implement that and can work towards that, I'm going to echo what Manju said, is join an organization that exists. And if you're not satisfied with the way that it looks or the way that it operates, be the one to change that. We learn all the time growing up in history classes that keeping the same type of leadership over years and years, right, decades, is what leads to leads to organizations to things just overall becoming stagnant. And that's what we want to avoid. Like the NAACP, for example, we are the oldest and the largest civil rights organization in existence within this country. So it's like, if we were to consistently keep the same type of leadership, you would never see an evolution. And that's actually one of the, I guess, markers or one of the issues that people have with the NAACP as it stands today. That's why it's really important that we have young people joining the Youth and College Division of the NAACP, preparing themselves to become the new leaders, because eventually, once we are old enough to actually join and become a part of that national leadership for the NAACP overall, you'll start to see those changes. And we've seen this over the last decades, literally since 1909 when we were founded. So I would say that, like, definitely join organizations as they exist, challenge those power structures as they exist, because just because something works for equality, justice, or equity doesn't mean that that's what's being practiced internally. So don't be afraid to challenge those that you find to be your allies, because at the end of the day, like I said, change doesn't happen if we can't challenge something, if we can't stay skeptical, and if we can't continue to push the envelope.
So I think, I want to see a world where Black women, especially dark-skinned Black women, especially Black trans women, are supported, they're listened to, and protected. And I think one thing, in order for that to happen, we all need to do our political education. We all need to do those readings and, really listen to, Black women like Angela Davis, go do those readings. Go read Ashad Shakur's autobiography. We have to do that reading because we can't keep repeating this. They said these things, 50 plus years ago, and it's still relevant today, and that's not okay. With that also being said, we need to make sure that every single person has the ability to exercise their right to vote. We're seeing, almost this attack on vote by mail. We're seeing an attack on voter ID laws and like voter suppression. We need to make sure every single person is able to exercise that right to vote. Voting is one action. Depending on where you live, it can take 10 minutes, it could take an hour, but it also can have a drastic effect. We're picking who our is in the fight for liberation. That's what we're doing when we go vote. Electoral work isn't going to save us. However, it can make life slightly better. So when we go vote, think about who's going to be our next opponent in this fight, in the revolution, I think is really, really important.
As Tatiana said, voting has the impact to change our current life right now. And while we are fighting for longer term solutions that will address systemic things, changing your current mayor or city councilor or county commissioner has impacts your current police department's budget, for example. Or if you take out your if you replace your state senator or your representative, that impacts like Medicare and Medicaid funding and stuff like that. So it has real-time impacts on your family and your neighbors. And I think that's like one of the most critical reasons voting matters.
Voting is important now more than ever in our communities because workers have the ability to literally vote themselves a raise as they can support candidates that support working people's issues such as increasing wages, access to paid sick days. In Massachusetts, where I live, we haven't been able to pass sick days since the onset of this pandemic. And so this is literally a matter of life or death of whether or not people are able to safely stay home in quarantine. And so voting is not just important, but it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of having access to healthcare and sick days and safety protections to be able to curb the spread of this pandemic and to be able to, in the long term, raise wages and working conditions for workers all across the country, across various sectors.
Hello everyone, my name is Armando Hernandez Jr. and I'm a current student at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. And today I'm going to be updating and reminding you all on methods of voting in Arizona. If you have requested to vote by mail and received your ballot, make sure you get that ballot sent out as soon as possible to make sure your vote is counted. All ballots must be received by November 3rd, 7 p.m. MST. If you are able, drop off your ballot at your nearest Dropbox location. Designated Dropbox locations can be found on your local county government website. Voting early in Arizona is easy. Polls are open 27 days prior to Election Day and up until 5 p.m. on the Friday before Election Day. Visit your county recorder's website or contact your county recorder directly to learn more about in-person early voting options in your county. If you miss early in-person voting, you can always vote in person at the polls on Election Day. To find your designated polling locations, you can visit vote.org for more information. If you are voting in person, make sure to bring proper identification. For voters in Arizona, you'll need to bring a valid United States federal, state, or local government-issued identification, or a tribal enrollment card or other form of tribal identification. And you cannot vote using solely a student ID for identification. For more information, visit azsos.gov. Lastly, for voters with disabilities, Arizona offers accessible polling places, curbside voting, Pebble, our permanent early voting list, assistance with completing election materials, and the Arizona Center for Disability Law is running a hotline to address any election concerns for people with disabilities. Call 602-274-6287 or 1-800-927-2260 from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Election Day. More information can be found at azsos.gov. Voting is your superpower. Use your voice to fight for your communities, your education, your loved ones, your children, and our future. Take your momentum to the polls and stay safe.
Hey everyone, my name's Sophia and I'm a student at the University of California, Berkeley, here with some voter information for you. In the state of California, all mail-in ballots must be postmarked on or before Election Day and received within 17 days following November 3rd. The best way to get your ballot in on time is to take it directly to a post office, a drop box, or your local polling place. Don't use a mailbox anymore, it's probably too late. Be careful where you drop off your ballot though. Fake ballot drop boxes have been appearing in Orange County. You can visit caearlyvoting.sos.ca.gov to find a real drop box near you. Remember, all mail-in ballots must be signed, dated, and filled out in either black or blue ink. Want to vote in person but don't want to wait in long lines on Election Day? Consider voting early. Right now, over half of California counties are Voters' Choice Act counties like LA, the OC, and others. That means you can vote early or on Election Day at any vote center in your county and not your specific precinct. On Saturday, more early vote centers will open in other California counties. To find a polling place or early vote center in your eligible precinct or county, visit earlyvoting.sos.ca.gov. If you plan to vote on November 3rd, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. As long as you're in line to vote before 8 p.m., you can't be turned away. If you received a by-mail ballot but plan to vote in person, bring your by-mail ballot to a polling place on Election Day to trade it in. If you never received your by-mail ballot, are not on the rolls, or have misplaced it, you can still show up and ask for a provisional ballot. Your vote will be counted as long as your mail-in ballot is not received as well. If you're not registered to vote, it's still not too late. You can still conditionally register from now until Election Day, but must complete a conditional voter registration process at your county polling place or vote center in person. If you're a first-time voter, you have to bring an ID. This can be either a driver's license, a government ID, a passport, or a student ID that includes a picture of you on it. If you are homeless, you can also still vote in the state of California. You can register, but it must be at a polling place on the day of the election. You will need to write a brief description under the address section. This could be something like the corner of Durant Way and Oxford Street or below Channing Bridge. You do need to include a zip code. Lastly, anyone convicted of a felony who is not currently in prison or on parole for that felony is eligible to vote in the state of California. I hope this helps.
Hi, my name is Thandiwe Abdullah. I'm an organizer with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. And I'd vote for a future where Black lives don't only matter when they're no longer here, and when we can have the resources that we need to live not only like as a surviving type of life, but where we can have all the resources that we need to thrive and live beautiful and healthy lives.
Hi, my name is Mercedes Woods. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am an advocate and a student here at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I vote for a future where everyone from every walks of life are able to go through the world as their authentic selves without being harassed, discriminated against, or felt unsafe in a world that was meant to be free for all.
Hi, I'm Stephen Martin. I'm a healthcare activist and I live with chronic leukemia. I vote for a future that envisions healthcare as a human right, that expands upon the progress of the Affordable Care Act and gets us to universal coverage quickly. I vote this way because when I was diagnosed, I ended up getting a medicine that cost $150,000 a year. And thanks to the laws that we have, I am still alive. I vote for this future because I deserve dignity, and so do you. And I think this is the best way to get there, by expanding healthcare.
Thank you to all of our panelists and participants for this powerful dialogue to help us reimagine our future and show us how we can come together with respect, honesty, and dare we say, love to make this future possible, both in the streets and at the ballot box. For years, politicians have written off the youth vote, and it's clear when you understand the weight of the student debt that we carry, or the inaction too many of our representatives take on climate change, or the homelessness too many of us face. It's clear that they have not been listening. The truth is that for years, they have not been listening because historically, young people haven't voted in the numbers that would make them pay attention or scare them about their next election. But this time, it's different. Our generation is different. We are more connected, more compassionate, and more intersectional than ever before. And we have the numbers not seen since the boomers, with the power to communicate and organize in ways that generations before us could never even begin to imagine, period. We understand that the issues we face are intersectional and require a new movement, one that is started in the streets and needs to build. For the systemic change that we want, we all need to stand with each other, for each other, and by each other. So what do we need to do to create the future we want to see? We have to reimagine the future by amplifying the voices that are most impacted by systems of oppression. Voices like yours, like the voices you heard tonight. Changing systems of oppression requires us to work at the grassroots level and to create a government that can enact the bold change required. That means we also need to reimagine what government looks like to make it equitable, sustainable, and safe. We also need to reimagine what our future looks like and make sure they look like us, our generation. As more of us come of age, we need to run for office. That's why voting is critical in this election. This is the year we start building our power to elect the politicians who will work for us and our generation. If not today, then in the coming elections. And this week, we have the chance to take a big step in building our power and vote for the future that we want, our future. Voting this week won't change everything, but if we all vote, it will show our current politicians our seriousness in creating this future. Then, we'll continue our activism after the election, and for future elections to hold our elected officials accountable. We have power in our hands if we choose to use it. And there has not been an election in our lifetime that is more important. Vote as if your life depends on it, because it does. I'm Tonatiuh. I'm an actor, an activist, a queer POC, child of immigrants. And I am voting to create the future where everyone, regardless of creed, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, presentation, whatever, has equal access to health, education, opportunity, and happiness. Thank you so much for joining us today. Go out and vote. You are loved, you are beautiful, and most importantly, you're not in this alone. Love you.